Hello and welcome to the Scotland Rugby News podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison, and him, Gavin Harper, the man from Scotland Rugby News, to pick over the bones of whatever that was that we witnessed on Saturday. How are you, sir?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Now I've recovered from a fairly disappointing Calcutta Cup. It was all there. It was all there for Scotland first half. And just 10-7 at half time. Never felt like it was going to be enough. And so it proved, sadly.
It felt so flat, the whole thing. I was in amongst English supporters. I wasn't there with Scottish folk. I was in amongst English supporters, and they were almost apologetic. It was just such a strange atmosphere. There was very little real celebration.
Yeah.
And just before we get on to Scotland, England just kicking the ball and kicking the ball and kicking the ball. Marcus Smith might as well have sat next to me. He had a little spell, I think, in the second half. He got himself into first receiver, two or three phases on the bounce, and he just looked like he was trying to get into it. And then Smith stepped up again, and they've got to play to the tactic, and they won the game. And I would rather have won the game kicking the ball away 16-15 than scoring three fantastic tries, lighting the game up 4 or 5 times and coming away with a loss. That, I mean, we can go back to stereotypes as much as we like, but Saturday couldn't have been more Scottish if we tried.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think from an England point of view, I couldn't quite work out why Steve Borthwick had picked the team he picked, because they had players in there, Ollie Slightholme, Marcus Smith at 15, who want to play, and that game plan is not to play.
A few of the English supporters that were sitting around me, when they took off Slightholme and brought on Elliot Daly, the chat was, we might as well have started Daly for playing like this, and Marcus be on the bench to come on at 10 to change things, because if we're just going to kick the leather off it and be defensive, pick Elliot Daly at 15 and pick the team to play this game. But you're right, Marcus Smith supposedly as that second creative player, and it just and it felt like almost an inevitability when they took off Slightholme. Daly came on. I actually thought he would have been the one hammering it over for the halfway line. But
I thought that too. Like Freddie Stewart as well, is so good under the high ball that he could have played fullback and Daly could have played on the wing. He could actually have made 2 changes to that back line, and it probably would have improved England playing with the game plan. They got the better of us up front. I think the scrum was, Scotland were toiling. I think they gave away 4.
The scrum was tough, and if we've spoken about Lions a lot and Xander, the scrum was tough, and I've got no clue what goes on in there and how everything's linked and how the support comes from everybody else. But I think the first 4 or 5 scrums resulted in penalties or free kicks to England. We got a couple later on in the game where we were able to clear it and actually play. But there was one point where the ref blew for the scrum, and I was like, I would rather have had some kind of rubbish advantage.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Scotland were struggling in the scrum. England's maul, I think, was pretty good at times. And look, these things aren't just attacking weapons, are they? They're such pressure relievers that when you're under pressure, if you're in your own 22 and you happen to have a line-out drive that's going to go take you 10, 15 metres, Scotland infringe, before you know it, you're at halfway and you're doing the same thing. So
it's energy sapping as well, and it's that it's that display of we are more powerful than you. And when Scotland were able to play, I mean, that Ben White's first try was so straightforward. I mean, simple.
Yeah,
England must be one. How on earth are we done? I mean, people were still getting to their seat. And there was no real lift of, wow, there's a line, like, that like when England broke the line, I don't know who missed the tackle, but when England broke through, there was then a surge of energy.
Yeah.
It was almost just, wow, that just happened. It was,
yeah, exactly.
The first try was so strange.
It was strange, and that's the thing. Like, let's make no mistake, Scotland have gone to Twickenham so many times and not been anywhere close to having a shot of winning it. I think the disappointment here is that is not a great England team. You know, they'll talk themselves up. Their media will talk them up something rotten in the next 2 weeks because they're now in with an outside chance of winning the championship. But that's not a great side. The thought of paying £150 possibly to go and watch that team doesn't thrill me.
And I get that, and it will, and it's like Murrayfield. Murrayfield's always going to sell out, right? And Twickenham's always going to sell out. But we've that phrase that I rile against every time: golden generation. You're only gold if you win something, and you've just said we've lost to a pretty average England side. And I'm not buying into it's the referee's fault. I'm not buying it. There was enough there, but both teams made some glaring errors that you wouldn't really associate with two teams at that level. The one-handed passes, the ball being thrown into touch, the knock-ons in the air, the line out that looked like it bangs off somebody's head. That there just seemed to be, both teams had a bit of disconnect, and then when it worked, it really worked. You know, Scotland click 3 times and score 3 cracking tries. I mean, all 3 of them, great pieces of rugby. England, although their try wasn't really one for the highlights package, it was consistent pressure, using their strength. They probably could have scored it a couple of phases before, but over they go and they get an easy conversion. I thought, wow, they're going to ride this wave now, and then they didn't follow it up. But both teams just, you know, talking about game plan, kick the ball up in the air, you bring on Harry Randall, you feel like the game's gone, 3 minutes to go, he sets up for a box kick, gets charged down, all of a sudden, we're on to win this now.
Yep.
The errors, it's test match rugby. I've never played that level. You know, who am I to complain and criticise? But there was stuff happened in the game that just had me just a bit of disbelief, and the atmosphere was just so flat.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that there's loads to go through. You know, I've seen loads of stuff about the ref and the try. Was it held up? Was it not? Like, Scotland are now back in this situation, and we were sat here 12 months ago talking about the France game, and the message at that time from the Scotland camp was, we need to take the game away from a referee. We need to make sure that, you know, the game is out of sight, or
absolutely.
The result does not come down to one refereeing decision. Whether the guy gives Finn the kick on the 5 or the kick 2 metres from the touchline, I know these things should be checked, and I appreciate that these are errors, but how many errors do the 23 players make in excuse me, in 80 minutes? So these refs make mistakes, yes, but that can't be the sole reason that people get wound up after the game because Scotland have lost. Finn's missed 3 kicks, but I said to somebody on Sunday, Finn Russell's won Scotland more games than he's directly lost Scotland. I think this idea that Finn's also not Johnny Wilkinson, he has these days that things can go, you know, we were saying just before we came on, he wasn't in a great sort of groove with his kicking out of hand.
He hit a couple really poorly, and he certainly wasn't at the full range. He wasn't going for what he's capable of going for.
Yeah, and somebody who knows an awful lot about goal kicking, I saw Johnny Wilkinson on ITV after the game saying, look, he hit the last one, probably the best he'd hit any of the 3 conversion attempts. But again, the way Scotland played in the first half, and I checked at half time, they had 60% territory, 56% possession in the first half. you shouldn't be relying on an 80th minute kick to win the game with the. I mean, Scotland had so much ball that it was there.
Well, here I got this. I better not say who I got it from in case because he sent me this on WhatsApp. But somebody who's much more in the know than me. Scotland had 59% territory and 58% possession. They scored 3 tries to England's 1. They carried for 933 metres compared to England's 474. So that's twice the distance. Yep. They made 9 line breaks to England's 2. They beat 35 defenders to England's 10. So if you just looked at stats, Scotland have won that game by 20 points and we lost by a point.
Yep.
And as I said at the beginning, I would have taken a 16-15 win with Ben White kicking the ball up in the air all day long.
And so would everybody else. You know, all the other Scots that had packed into Allianz Stadium, we should call it, I suppose, rather than Twickenham.
Refuse.
On Saturday. But do you know, like, now the frustration again is golden generation, you know, this crop of players, whatever you want to call them, we're now back to 2 games to go. Right, well, what can we salvage? What can Scotland salvage from the Six Nations? And it's just not good enough. It's you know, yes, these other teams, and we've talked for a long, long time, you've said to me, I'm worried about England. I think England can't be as bad as they've been for the last 12 to 18 months. Scotland are now looking at a game against Wales, who, like, the worst Welsh team in history, and saying, that's must win. And
I saw a stat that this run that Wales have lost 15 games is the same as the number of games Richie McCaw lost in his entire All Black career.
I mean, I think that says more about that All Blacks team than it does about
and Richie McCaw. Like, I get that, and stats like I've just read, I mean, they could mean very little, but it kind of tickled me sometimes when I see those things. I never put, and somebody spoke to me on Saturday about substitutions. And I said I was never a plan. So I think England they brought on Jamie George at 44 minutes.
Yeah.
And as the hooker on the field, Luke Cowan-Dickie, like, what was he told at halftime? Listen, Luke, you've got 4 minutes. Go for it, big man. and Hill comes off the bench about 30 seconds to go, right at the end of the game. Like, go on, son, make a difference. Here's the faith I've shown you. Stuff like that. I was and obviously never coached at that high level, but I was pretty much a gut coach. Yeah. Right, now's the time for a change. Now, I never really had it in my head, right, at 45 minutes I'm making a change. And like stuff like that, I would imagine Luke Cowan-Dickie was pretty fired up and wanting to play, and you hook him after 4 minutes at half time, having heard all the messages about here's what we need to do, and probably that standard, listen, next 10 minutes means this, and you're only on for 4 of them.
Yeah, no, but look, I think you probably have touched on another good point. Like, folk will talk about the missed kick, the ref, but like, Scotland have to take a look at themselves. When England, some of those players England brought on, you think of Jamie George, Cunningham South.
That laddie is absolutely enormous.
He
warmed up in front of me, and I was like, imagine tackling for whatever it is, 60 minutes, and then that comes on.
Yeah, he is huge. But you know, these guys, Finn Baxter, there was certainly no drop when somebody like Finn Baxter came on for Ellis Genge, but Curry and Cunningham South and these guys, Jamie George, added real impact. Scotland's bench, by and large, I'll take Stafford McDowell out, but because I think he did okay, Scotland's bench was rotten. Like, Ewan Ashman had one of the worst cameos I think I've ever seen.
See, there's like Ashy, like, what was that pass that he threw into touch, I've never seen him do anything like that before, ever.
Is that just pressure though, or is that somebody's got carried away? But I mean, some of the I don't know, and like that we've said time and time again, we've got a guy on the bench, Will Hurd, who's basically only there to get a cap if the game is gone either way, because Xander is so important. You know, Dobie did okay, but again, it felt like we were making a change because we had to make a change. Stafford played well when he came on. Hugh Jones obviously picked up a bit of a knock. But
that one wasn't the plan. Like Stafford, the plan wouldn't have been Stafford for Shuggy.
No.
But the Ewan Ashman one, when he threw that, I was and I think Ashley's a cracking lad, and he's so physical, and that's what that was what was on for. It just, I don't know. Are you told get away? Or it just felt like a flash of, and he'll be kicking himself. Like nobody will be giving him more of a hard time than he is. Dave Cherry throws one out the back and he scores a try. If Ashley throws that and it goes to hand, all of a sudden we're raving about him as well. There's these fine margins, but I spoke to an English supporter on Saturday who was laughing about the build-up, about how Scotland's autumn tests. He was like, "Who did you play again?" The sort of the ratio. He was like, we were losing to good teams. You were, and I said, okay, I kind of get your point, but you do what you do. And we were then talking about the Lions, and Kyle Stain was in the room, and he was talking about Scottish players that got a chance for the Lions. But we said many weeks ago, Scotland have to perform to give players the chance. And there's Gibson Park picks up another Player of the Match award. Yeah. We were talking about Dempsey and Fagerson, and all of a sudden Jamie Ritchie gets a Player of the Match award and comes into the team for a reason. Darge hasn't been picking those up, but he is the captain. So the players that you want to be stepping forward, I think are finding it challenging, whereas the Irish players just seem to be growing. James Lowe pulls a move out that's, I mean, he's starting for the Lions.
Yeah, not totally.
And then you look at beyond for Scotland, in the autumn, USA, that'll be outside the window. And then you play New Zealand and Argentina, and then you've got Tonga. So really, we're back to, we beat Australia in the autumn, and that was a good thing. It's just the expectation that we were all flying with. I feel like we've dropped back quite a few notches, and I'm pretty sad about that. And Saturday, I said for the very beginning of the championship, the England game felt like a cup final. It felt like that was hinging for both teams, England and Scotland. Saturday was massive. I'm not really sure what either of them got out of it. England have got a trophy that only two teams play for, and Scotland scored 3 nice tries. I'm not sure either team's better than they were 2 weeks ago.
No, I agree, but I think we're now back to this situation where ultimately people talk about Gregor. Is he the right man to take Scotland forward? Have we had another Six Nations where we've proved that he's not been able to give the team that final step, take the team that final step?
And the Six Nations is so hard. Like, it's so intense because it's every game matters. It's not like a league. It's not, even the way the Irish teams treat the URC. When it's business time, it's business time.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, the Welsh did it. Sam Warburton, I think, played more games for Wales than he did for Cardiff Blues.
Yeah.
So there's the Six Nations for us is our be all and end all, and we're just finding it really difficult because Ireland's depth is so good. I mean, France look like they're back on the horse in true French style. They go from the ridiculous to the sublime in the space of 7 days.
Yeah, that was an incredible result yesterday. But I just wonder, like I said it before, Wales is now must win. But actually, I think I keep going back to that. When we had that conversation with John McGuigan last April, he made it quite clear that 2 wins in the Six Nations was not acceptable and that Scotland had underperformed. I don't know that Alex Williamson and David Nucifora particularly will be the driver in this, determining whether Gregor gets the chance to see out the last 12 months of his contract. And I don't know if beating Italy and this Wales team at home is enough to say we've seen signs of progress, given that Scotland's last 12 months have included that summer tour to the Americas, Portugal. I think if Scotland lose to Wales, and I think it's done. Rob Robertson's column says this on the site today as well. Lose to Wales and Gregor's done. But even victory against Wales and a defeat in Paris might be enough for Nucifora to say, I think we need to make a change. And obviously there is a huge dynamic in this with Franco's future being sort of uncertain. But Scottish rugby, if Franco is being as heavily considered and fancies that job, the Wales job, Scottish rugby have to do something to try and keep him, because I think it would be a mistake to see him go to another union.
Wow, that was big. I'm no as somebody sitting here as a coach who's been sacked. I'm never a big fan of a chat like that. And Gregor can point to many moments and many records. I think the other thing is that and loads and loads of people would say Gregor's rubbish. Gregor's a terrible coach. He's not. Nah,
Gregor's a really, really good coach. And I think if that is the decision that is made, it would be a shame. Gregor's been a great coach for Scotland. He's been obviously a terrific player in his time. But people, I think now there will be a discussion in the next few weeks about, has he gone with this team as far as he can? And is it just time for a new voice? And the decision might be no. The decision might be let Gregor have till, the end of his contracts next year. But you're then only a year out from the World Cup. And I think that's all part of the framework in the decision making. I'm not, I'd never ever be one to stand up and say the solution is sack the coach. But I think in the context of what's happening with Franco, in the context of the fact that Gregor's only got a year left on his deal, means that'll definitely be in the thoughts of somebody like David Nucifora and obviously Alex Williamson, the new chief exec.
Yeah, I can't even really begin to see what happens and how it happens, because we have periods like this where then everybody goes and examines the whole thing. And then we have periods of success and highs where everybody goes, yeah, it's okay. That, like what somebody was saying to me on Friday, they would love to see Fergus Burke play for Scotland because they think he's good enough. Now, I've got no clue. I know nothing about Fergus Burke. But that's not to do with the system. We've not produced that player that somebody's saying it should get a shot. So, and back to adding things to the list of pods for another day. How does that work? But Scotland could play Wales and France, win both, and things start to look pretty good. But only if there's a performance and a consistency. It can't be that France are terrible and have an off day. It has to be that Scotland are the ones making things happen. And that's on Saturday, you just felt like, I have to admit that there was a bit of gloom around. My feeling was, oh no, I can see this coming. But there was also this bit, and it's probably my heart saying, we're going to get this. We're going to nick this. Finn's going to nudge this over, or we're going to go the length and score here. Like, I still had this burning passion for, no, it's going to be all right. We're going to lift the lid on this place. And unfortunately didn't. And that find a way to win, yeah, it just, I feel for the players because I know that they are gutted. They can only be gutted. They've given a huge amount. Again, people I'm talking to, somebody was saying, Will Hurd should be getting more of a go. Will Hurd's a player and should be getting more. Now, I don't know anything about him other than what he does for Scotland, and he doesn't get to do very much.
And I think that's tough. It's tough to make that case when the guy in front of you has got the pedigree that Xander's got. But there's a frustration that I think in the first weekend, the Italy game, we got a real impact from Ashman, Sutherland, Dempsey, from that bench. There was, and Will Hurd, I think he got the last sort of 5 minutes in that game as well. But, when it goes well, these players can come on and really add to that. But when you're up against it, feels like Scotland sometimes lack the players to turn that momentum round and change a game. I think we've got plenty of game changers. And look, not having Scott Cummings has been a massive blow in the second row. Not having Sione has been a huge blow in the midfield. I think guys who've come in have done good jobs, but like before the Six Nations, we were talking about Sione potentially being the best 12 in the world. So
there was a point where Tom Jordan carried it. I think it was maybe off a line out, and he carried in a contact, and you just thought that was a call for Sione. Like that was and then you see Ireland bring on Bundyaki for whatever it was, 15 minutes, and he just tears the place to pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And but again, there's a player who's come on, and Ireland were in a bit of a sticky situation, and he sorted them out. He's made a real difference to the game. I sometimes feel like Scotland's, and I've thought this for a while, Scotland's bench come on and don't. There's no real game changers there. It's changes for fresh legs, basically.
Yeah, I would love to see the Welsh game be a huge lift, a performance and a victory with lots of daylight, with Blair having an impact on the game, with Finn at full noise, scrum holding its own, if not getting an upper hand, back row, being physical. I just, and Jamie threw himself around on Saturday. There was a couple of penalties that I didn't really know what they were for against us, but and even there was a couple of discipline things that just when you're in the heat of the battle, just little things that it just left such an empty feeling on Saturday, and it gave me no sort of lift that the English were feeling pretty similar. I would quite like some hollow victories rather than some absolutely gut-wrenchingly full losses.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think that, it's, I don't know how it'll take a lot to pick because they now know the championship's over, the Calcutta Cup's gone. It'll take a lot, I think, for Gregor and the coaches to pick the players up over the next sort of few days and then make sure that they're ready to go after this sort of break week. I think one of the interesting things, we obviously spoke to Gregor a fair bit after the game, and he made an interesting comment about Blair Kinghorn suggesting that Darcy Graham is obviously back, Gregor's hoping to have Darcy back for the Wales game. And then he said, I was reading this back, Blair Kinghorn might be a different case. He'll have to go back to Toulouse, but Toulouse are playing Van, who I think are bottom of the top 14. So he hopes that Blair gets a rest. But it sounded like, and I might be reading too much into Gregor's comments, but it sounded like if Blair does play for Toulouse, Gregor might not pick him to play Wales. So that's an interesting one just to possibly keep an eye on over and see how it kind of unfolds, because I must admit, I did think that was strange, but there's a precedent for that kind of thing. I think Ben White was kind of fatigued last year, Gregor said, from going back and forward to Toulon, and they actually left him out of the Italy game, which proved to be a really not a great decision. Scotland could have used his game management in Rome. So look, we'll wait and see. Maybe I'm totally reading too much into it, but it might be one that unfolds and we can pick through in a week's time.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope they get time to distance themselves from it and come back ready to go. They're going to have to find a bounce. That's it for me. They're going to have to find a bounce, because when they did show a bit of energy, and they were creative. They made space. They made the English back defence look really, really pedestrian. I was really surprised with the ease they opened it up, and Jockey Sherritt coaching Wales. This is their cup final. This is everything is on this, because otherwise that losing streak gets longer. Players' futures are in doubt. Supporters are going nuts. Jockey's in quite a nice situation in that it's not really him, but I mean, if he gets a win, he's absolutely made it. And then at least they get to go into the last weekend with a bit of confidence, and they've got 2 weeks to do it. They've got time to do it. In some ways, Scotland have got too much time to think about it.
Yeah, it's that thing we talked about, the Edinburgh and Glasgow, contrasting sort of emotions after the 1872 Cup. Scotland probably now will be hurt, but I think even not even 48 hours after the game, we'll be able to say we actually did some pretty good stuff there, but we didn't win. So do they have, as you say, too much time on their hands to go through it all and overanalyze and all that kind of stuff, and they'll be desperate to just get a win, put all the things that went wrong right. Whereas Wales, they've got, they will be applying the handbrake for 2 weeks, because they must think, well, hang on a minute, from where we've been, we almost beat a team who are going for 3 championships in a row and a Grand Slam. Like, we gave Ireland an incredible game for 55, 60 minutes, and if LSME scores in the corner, it's a totally different game, and they maybe do win it. So, yeah, I mean, your mate Jockey will be having to probably pull some of those players off the ceiling.
Yeah, I would love to be in the Scotland camp. I'd love to just be in and around them now. I would love to be chatting to them and trying to get them going, and I would love this, but I wish I was there. The Welsh bit, if you're hurting, I don't think you're saying anything, because you're desperate to play on Saturday against Scotland.
Yeah.
If you're Scottish and you're sore, you're maybe hurting a little bit more psychologically. Whereas the Welsh, you'll be desperate to play in this one, because if they get a win, all of a sudden everything feels better.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's such a difficult balance of that emotion, and then Wales, I imagine, will be in the same boat, that they'll have most of their players as Scotland will with Edinburgh. So it's a really even kind of match up, in that most of the squads will be rested. There'll be 1 or 2 players have to maybe go back to English or French clubs, but I don't imagine many of them will play. I certainly don't think Finn would be asked to play this weekend by Bath. So there's
we'll see.
There's a lot.
I'll be interested to see who plays for Edinburgh and Glasgow.
Well, it's another point, and I was hard on you and Ashman earlier, but does he go back and say, to Gregor even. Look, I had 15 minutes there, and I felt like it wasn't great. Can I go back to Edinburgh and play?
I think some players might. Like Sam Skinner looks like he's pretty hungry for things. Is he sticking his hand up to say, "Can I start, please?" But maybe that means he doesn't play against Edinburgh. Play for Edinburgh, sorry.
And I mean, we're recording this at lunchtime on Monday, and once we hit end recording, I'll be jumping in the car and going to Hive to speak to Sean Everett. So hopefully we get some sort of detail on who's available for Edinburgh this weekend. Then Glasgow have got their media access. It's tomorrow, so again, hopefully we find out more there. I think it will be interesting, but we'll need to wait and see for some clarity, and that maybe gives us a better picture of where people are at and who might be in the running in terms of, it's only 48 hours after the game, but in terms of possible changes or selection dilemmas for Wales.
Nice one. Thanks, pal. Good to chat. Just a weird feeling, and hopefully we didn't have any more of them. You can sign up £1 for 6 months, read all about it. There's heaps going on, and the longer this championship goes on, there's more and more, because there's so many stories cutting out of that performance, shall we call it, on Saturday. So plenty to get involved, and we've got Edinburgh and Glasgow back in it, and then we've got 2 to go. Gav, good to see you. Enjoy. Catch you soon. End of the week. Nice one, fella. All the best, folks. Look after yourselves.